Hey everyone, welcome to another Energetic Arts training session. This topic I've been wanting to get into for quite some time now. Uh, it's something that's been sort of pressing on me to get done for, I was supposed to lead with this topic and, move this into the forefront and everything else was supposed to spin off from there. Because, training um, the approach to training is so key. It's so important to all this because without understanding how to move towards it, um, you can waste a lot of time. You can get caught up in a lot of stuff, and I've seen a lot of people fall by the wayside and drift off into oblivion and never to return. And sort of metaphorically, so to speak, take the blue pill and go back into the matrix and disappear. And it's not something I recommend because once you pop out and you become aware of things and you try to go back into the status quo, um, it can be, I've seen it break people. So I don't want anyone to get broken. What I want is for everyone to be uh, really prepared and to be able to take the right approach to this spiritual practice, this training, to ascend and to expand your consciousness and your awareness, and to move your energy into states of vibration and frequency that give you greater access to your reality. And to do this, I think we have to sort of look at a few aspects because it's not just this one liner, unique selling point type of thing. Um, where we're going with this is is quite a revolutionary step in terms of conscious awareness. And so, there's a lot of stories out there about where this is all going. Um, and there's a lot of avenues you can go down, and you can get caught up in all the conspiracy theory stuff, but that's just sort of halfway. Once you've become aware of all these secret space programs and aliens and Mayan calendars and all of these prophecies and things, it sort of wakes you up to all these different theaters that are going on, these different mindsets that are playing out. And, you know, we, we want to move beyond all that. We want to go right past all that because those two are just like little neddies in the stream of consciousness that we can get sort of sucked into and lose a lot of time and get distracted in and all that sort of stuff. And so, and then the other thing is, we don't want to push too hard to get through all these things to get to the end because there is no end. And so, to give you an idea of, how to approach this, at least from my perspective, since I've been through this, is we have to use a lot of metaphors because what we're talking about isn't really spoken of. It's sort of hard to talk about, and it's hard to see if you're not aware of it. And once you're aware of it, then you can talk about it in different ways to people, and you can get into specifics. But in the beginning, you're still waking up. You're still trying to understand what this is all about. So I think we'll start at the end and then come back on some of the methods and pathways to get there. And so I've had this experience where I've, popped out of my body and had an out of body experience, and not just one, but many, many times. And this has happened throughout my whole life in various ways, sometimes spontaneous, more recently now in the last several years, maybe up going back for maybe 10 years, has been more on command, more with precision, more with intention. And so we have to really understand that, the cliches go, where an energetic being having a human experience, or a spiritual being having a human experience, and people are like, that all sounds wonderful and mystical, and there's a lot of bliss involved. And when people really tap into who they are, they can become very happy, very excited about their life, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm not trying to, step on that. Like, if you're there, keep it up, keep going, beam it out everywhere you can go, get as many people, hooked on your vibe as you can, because it's a beautiful state to be in. And I think the goal of everyone is to sort of get there. But on the other side of it is, we're really learning or unlearning who we are, in terms of flipping this viewpoint of being this meat sack with a brain that we only use a smidgen of in this hostile environment, trying to make ends meet. And hopefully you hit the big time and you win the lottery, and then you can retire, and then you can do yoga and practice your meditation, and then you can hopefully God floats down on his cloud and taps you on the forehead, and then you become enlightened. Which is really a naive way of putting it. And I don't mean to insult anyone who's watching here, because the way I see it, if you're watching this, then you've come a long way already, and you already know all this shit. But it's the other way around. It's like, well, you're the God here, and it's not even that you're the God. You're whatever it is that gives rise and dimensions and the framework to the concept of a God. And so what's beyond God, and that's where you come in. And that's the essence of you, filtering and funneling down through the layers of light and consciousness, and compressing into this dense midline vibration of being able to inhabit a body in this reality, whatever this reality is. And in my mind, it's more energetic than anything else. It's more like a virtual reality that is just, there's so much detail, the resolution is so high, the response time is so fast. You just, like I've heard from these guys that are doing VR now, designing VR games, they say, when is the mind hack effective? Because they're looking for full immersion. The better the immersion, the better the game, and the better, and they're saying that it's when you don't notice that it's a game, that's when the mind hack takes place. And so we need to understand that, this is all metaphorically just a big game that we're playing, played out in all these really sophisticated and elaborate storylines and all that sort of thing. And I know this can be a bit shocking and a bit flippant. I'm sounding a bit flippant, but we've sort of been seduced into all of these games, and some of them, most of them, let's be honest, are really like crap. It's like watching, you get out the remote and you flick channels for endlessly, and you go all around there's 1,000 channels, and you come back to the first channel you started with, and at the end of the day, there's nothing to watch. And all of these things are just traps for your awareness. They're all just there to get your awareness into a certain thing, because when you place energy on that, then it's like investing in, it's like paying out to whatever it is you're paying attention to. And with that attention, people can do lots of things with it. Okay, so the way we need to approach this is also stripping the layers away, but we need to do this, in a way where we're doing it safely, because taking these veils off, peeling these veils back, getting tuned into these higher amplitudes of energy and higher vibrations and frequencies can not always be profound and blissful. They can be quite, traumatic. They can be quite profound, but not positively profound. And it can really rock your world. Okay, so when you start pulling these layers back, especially layers like time, when you start moving from a third dimensional time based reality, linear time base, into fifth dimensional and beyond, where time, moves in all directions, time's infinite, then it takes a lot of adjusting to relax into. And so relaxation is a big key. And we'll get into techniques and stuff that you want to be training in. But we also need to look at the processes. It's a process. It's not this prize that you get. It's a process. And I need to use some metaphors to get into this. Now I'm wearing the Los Angeles Rams shirt here, this, supporting this team. And it's only because I'm in Los Angeles. But whether you like the Rams or not, I don't care. I don't care if I like the Rams or not. The point is that these guys who are playing in this game, and the cheerleaders who support, and the umpires and all the staff and everything, they are at the top of the game. They're at the top level that you can play at. And they didn't just get there overnight. Like, everyone wants to be the famous, quarterback, or whatever it is, the famous running back, the captain of the cheerleading squad, if that's your thing, whatever. But there's a lot of work that goes into that. There's a lot of training. Most of these guys have been training in that since they were little kids, little peewees. And there was this story. I came back and I was watching YouTube and looking at how these guys train. And I tell you what, they are full on. They are really, they call it work, because it is work. They are working all the time to either get into the big league, to stay in the big league, or just to keep expanding their level and play even better. Because even when you're at the top of the game, you still want to keep that high standard. And so training, these guys are training so much, so often. They're just like, they've got bodies of superheroes. They're just like so fit and so strong, and mentally strong. Because you look at some of these workouts that they're doing on YouTube, and it's enough to make you want to puke, because just watching it, right? And so these guys are actually doing it, and they're doing it all the time. Now, if you and I were to go in there as a normal person, still very high in our games, but when it comes to playing their game, we're not tuned into that. If we were to go and do their workout, we'd be like on the floor in agony, puking in the bucket. Mine would be going crazy, saying stop, it hurts, all that sort of stuff. Within about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if you're lucky, half an hour. Okay. And it's something like, if you jump into that level, it's going to shock you. It's going to ruin you. So you don't do that, obviously. Like, no one in their right mind would jump in and try and train at a professional level on their first day into a new area that they've never explored before. And so why are we doing that in a spiritual sense? Some people are jumping out of an emotional addiction like television or um, partying or whatever, and then they decide, or they're depressed, or whatever it is, whatever reason got you into wanting to become more spiritual and start training in a spiritual way, is that you get into it and you're going like, some of you are replacing your emotional addiction with a spiritual addiction to certain things. And so you're pushing yourself to become enlightened, or you're pushing yourself to understand things, or you're pushing yourself out of your old habits. And one thing that you would notice with these high performing athletes, like the best of the best, is that although they're putting a lot of energy and work into their training, when they do these amazing performances that when you look at, that their higher intelligence is running the show there. It's not their ego or their body doing it. Their body is trained and tuned in so much that consciousness and energy can flow through effortlessly and do the exact right thing at the exact right time and collapse reality in a way that maybe no one's ever seen before, or seems so the odds of it collapsing into reality is so astronomical. It's like winning the lottery, where they pull off the win when they shouldn't be able to, or they get that goal, or that they shoot that hoop on the buzzer and win the final. These things, when we see them, there's something inside us that gets sparked, that we just go, that's it. That's someone tuned in at the highest level, embodying it in their body and projecting and collapsing reality and observing it all at once in that moment, in a way where it's just so profound. And so I know we all want to be able to do that, and we all want to do it often and predictably, but that to all that is leading up. There's all like years of training, years of practice, and I know no one wants to hear, oh, you mean I've got to go back and meditate for 20 years or whatever. It's not that people at this level are thinking about the work that they have to do to be there. They're thinking about being there, and when they're there, it's very casual. It's almost like there's no effort to it. They're just doing it. It's just who they are now. It's just how it is for them. Um, they don't have to try. Okay, they don't necessarily need to work at it. All the work's been done, and now they're just tweaking and tuning it in and keep growing on that base of that mastery. And so it would be a good place to start, in the mind at least, is to ask yourself what it is to be masterful at these things. And so then we move into the next metaphor, and I like to talk about this because it's such a cool area. And I was watching YouTube again because I do a lot of research and a lot of study on all sorts of different topics, and I just don't, go on the mainstream stuff. I cross reference, I look at all the opinions I can, I devour absolutely everything I can on a particular topic or subject until I'm really satisfied that I've got a good handle on what the subject is, what it means, what it doesn't mean, where the boundaries are, where the map is, what the map looks like before I enter it. And so in this story, I want to talk about the Blackbird SR-71 spy plane that was built in the 1960s after what was the name? The first spy plane got shot down over Russia, and they thought, okay, we need an even better plane that can fly even higher and even faster. and the Blackbird SR-71 was built. And even to this day, like it operated all the way through to the 1980s, and then it was declassified in the 90s. You know, we started to see it more and more, and hear more stories about it. But when you look at this thing, you know, it was futuristic. It was like way ahead of its time. There was nothing around that, you know, you looked at. I was like, where the fuck did this thing come from? Like, how did they dream this up, for one? And how did they make it? And how is it possible that it's doing? Because it was a quantum leap. You know, most jets were flying it so high, and this thing was like twice the twice and a half, I think, was right on the edge of space, in the 1% of the atmosphere, right on the edge of space. It was still an air breathing jet, and had these engines that were turbo ramjets. So it would have this huge jet afterburner thing that would just push this thing up to Mach 2, I think it was. And then it had these inlets that let the air in, and then it would spread it around the jet and squirt it out the back. And it would be like a ramjet. And so the more air that came in through the inlet, because the more it could squirt out, which meant the faster it go, the more air coming in, and the faster the air coming in it had, which mean it could squirt it out even faster. So it was this potentially unlimited speed vehicle, and its body was made of titanium. Now, no one had ever made a plane out of titanium before. This was also a radical step. So, in order to do that, you know, because titanium's this weird metal that's very hard to work with. It's very strong. That's why they used it, and they used it because at those speeds that they were going for, you know, there was so much heat and so much stress on the plane that it needed to be strengthened, you know, through, you know, everywhere it could be, so that when it did get up to that speed, it would hold together, and it did. And then you notice these beautiful swooping lines. If you're looking at it front on, you had the cockpit here, and these beautiful swooping lines, and almost like this kind of, well, not quite flat bottom, but and that was all to diffuse the radar and the beams of radar coming in, and deflect them and absorb them and all that sort of stuff. So it became invisible to radar. So you've got this thing, this jet flying in the upper atmosphere. You can't even see it, it's so high. Even if you could see it that high, it's going so fast, it's going like 2 or 3 times the speed of a bullet. So you can't even see it moving through space. And then on radar, it's undetectable, or almost undetectable. So you got the trifecta. As far as the stories go, I mean, I think it did a bombing run a couple of times that they've admitted to, but most of the time, all it did was take photographs of the terrain and do surveillance. And whenever it was shot at, first of all, it was up too high for most missiles to even hit. And secondly, when they had all this jamming technology inside the back seat, the guy in the back seat, the SRO, the reconnaissance officer, he would detect that they were being shot at, and he would start jamming the guidance system on the missile and causing all this static or whatever it was to get the missile to go off track. And if that didn't work, then they just open the throttle up and they just outrun everything, right? So, and this was in the 60s, okay? And like I said, it was operational until the 80s, late 80s, maybe early 90s even. I think in the 90s the program got shut down. And, you know, obviously the people involved were disappointed, but why they said, oh, you know, satellites can do all that sort of stuff now. But then, you know, you get deeper into that secret space program, there's all these other aircraft that no one's ever seen before, that are apparently out there that um, we don't know if they exist or not. And it's an interesting concept to think about, because the Blackbird itself was a plane that didn't exist up until about the 80s, until we got told that it exists. But the approach to that kind of outcome, that kind of game changing technology, started much earlier. I think they were talking about the X-15 and all these development programs that started right at the end of the Second World War, 1945. 1950, there were all these different aircraft, different concepts that they were testing, and all these different things. And there's even talks that was all like reverse engineered from crashed UFOs. And not this isn't about whether we believe in UFOs or not. It's not as important as the essence of this topic, and the approach to training and spiritual practice is that in order to develop something like the Blackbird, there was decades of research, development, testing, excuse me. Some of the most brilliant minds in the field working in teams to get this done. The pilots themselves, according to the stories, were all selected out of other programs that were currently already running, and they were either close to or had to be the best in their field to be even considered for the team. And then after that, you had to be of the right personality type to work in with the rest of the team, because they would spend 6 to 10 months of the year away, only with each other, operating. So when we're getting into this, we have to sort of get into this as in terms of what it would be like if you were training to be part of that squadron, that crew, that one of those pilots. And we're using the example of the SR-71, but it goes beyond that. There's obviously high levels, and you can only imagine what those programs have evolved into now, what kind of technology they're using now. And so for me, I'm just going to come out and say it, is that when we're going towards this spiritual practice, like where we're going with it is, let me just quit that, that's distracting, is that everything that you're seeing, including like the Blackbird and all these advanced aircraft that are supposedly able to bend time, space, and to teleport from one point in time and space to another, and using all these advanced, amazing propulsion systems that most of us have never even heard of, wouldn't even have any idea how to understand how they work, even if the person who was developing them was sitting in front of us telling us how they worked. We'd still maybe not really grasp it all because we didn't have the foundation to. All of this stuff is a physical extension and expression of the essence of what we already are. And so as an energetic being that's been around for infinite time, and if you just imagine as a human mind thinking about how much time has passed since the Big Bang, billions of years, the essence that gives life to everything has been around at least that long. And probably, that's just the tip of the iceberg to how long this energy and consciousness has been around on an energetic level before it decided to collapse down into a physical dimension. So you've got all that time of evolution, and think about the SR-71 from the 60s to the 80s, and then from the 80s to now, how much development has been going into these programs, and how many conspiracy theories about the secret space programs and breakaway civilizations that have been, not reportedly, suggested that they're at least 150 to maybe 50,000 years ahead of today's consensus agreed upon mainstream timeline reality. And so this, if we go back to what I was saying before, this essence that's been around from before the Big Bang, which is conscious, by the way, and has been evolving all that time, one day, one moment in time, decides that it wants to begin to have a physical experience. So it creates the universe, creates the planets, creates the environment first, and then it starts collapsing down smaller and smaller and smaller into physical beings, physical bodies, and then it evolves all the way from single cell organism up to this human body, which is supposed to be the crowning achievement of the universe, right? And you think, well, what does that mean? Because I'm just a human, I'm just an ordinary guy, I'm only human. Like, are you for real? Do you know that the human body is probably it's the synthesized body of every body that's ever existed? Let's just let that sink in for a second. Just like the SR-71 was the peak of the aviation evolution up until that time that we know of, right? I'm sure there are other programs going on side by side in different parallels that did for different specific things that are also just as amazing and just as intriguing if you think about it. But from the time the Wright brothers did their first little 5-meter glide to the SR-71 at 90,000 feet on the edge of the 1% of space, going at Mach 5 plus, humming along, loving it with, just loved going fast. Like it had it just ate up the speed. Like it just could keep going faster and faster and faster. And even the pilots today haven't really disclosed how fast it can go. And that plane was retired in the late 80s, and it's 2018 now as I say this. That plane was the synthesis of all the engineering of every plane that ever came before it that went into being able to do what it did. So the human body is a synthesis of all those bodies that came before it. Cro-Magnon man, Homo erectus, blah, 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 all the way down, if you believe in Darwinism, if we're going to use that model at least. And so the complexities on a physical level are mind-boggling. Doctors themselves have to do, I think it's a minimum of 10 years of study before you can start working on another human being. If you're a surgeon, it's something else. If you're a cardiac surgeon, if you're a neurosurgeon, it goes beyond, right? You never stop, ever. And I've spoken to neurosurgeons and I've said, hey, we've had some interesting brain scans. It's data. It's actually done. There it is on the screen, on the computer. These are the readouts. What do you think it means? And you know what they say to me? Because, they've got reputations to uphold and protect. They've got their whole reality that they've created that rides on them being the be-all authority and end-all in their field. and they've been, in it for a long, long time. And so they can't just come and say, well, we don't bloody know what it means. They have to say, well, I tell you what it does mean. It means that there's more to the brain that we need to learn about. And it's a very diplomatic answer, which just means, we don't know what the fuck it meant, but that's remarkable. So coming back on board, when we start moving this energy up the spine, we talk about energy centers, talk about meridian lines, talk about auras, talk about energy fields. We're moving awareness back towards where the essence came from that gave rise to the body over billions of years or millions of years of evolution, to the point where I can sit here inside this body and speak to you. And it can make all these sounds, and the tongue does all these things, and the vocal cords and the right amount of pressure of air, and it hits and creates all these vibrations, and it goes through this microphone all the way through this computer, across the internet to wherever you are in the world, comes out, translated back out onto your screen through this computer, this phone, whatever it is you're looking at this through, and you hear those sounds almost exactly the same as how I've produced them. And then your brain makes sense of them and you understand it. You realize just how complex that process is, and we do it automatically. We don't even think about how we do it. It just happens. Okay, it's like the mind hack, right? The autopilot on this thing, you don't even know how it works, and it's working for you, and you're making sense of what the autopilot tells you it's doing. So you haven't even really gotten the driver's seat yet. Okay. Just let that sink in for a second. You don't even know how you make sense of what I'm saying. Really. You don't understand that process. Let's just be real. Okay. So moving beyond that, now we're going more energetic. We're going back into the code. Okay. So it's one thing about the hardware. Let's go back to the plane. It's one thing to have this plane there, this Blackbird, this incredibly engineered jet, right? But do you know that was developed before computers were around? Engineers used slide rules and pen and paper to design that plane, and then they built it, and it worked perfectly. And even to today, engineers using computers and re-inputting all the dimensions back in the computer would have made it exactly the same as how the humans designed and built it. Okay, that's phenomenal when you think about it. That's like, about the moon, the flights to the moon. I'm not getting into whether the moon landings are real or not. It's just interesting to think about that when they were doing it, they had people doing all the math and the calculations and the projections with calculators and pen and paper and slide rules, while they were programming the computers to help them do the calculations, right? And these people were called computers. All right. So everything in your reality, everything you experience is an extension of what you are. It's an extension of you. If it wasn't, it couldn't exist, because how could any human being conceive of something that they are not already? Think about that for a second. That SR-71 Blackbird is a representation of what the human body already is capable inherently within it and more. So when we're going to be talking about doing stuff like breath work, breath gearing, and the breath, where you're accelerating that energy up and out through the body so quickly that it's like a nuclear centrifuge, moving energy from the base to the top of the head, through the pineal gland, out through the top of the head and out into the field so quickly that it breaks the speed of light within what, a meter? 0 to the speed of light and beyond within a meter through a breath. Getting all those muscles coordinated to get that energy spinning up and out and just shoot consciousness out of the third dimensional space, the physical body, and have an out of body experience. That's the beginning, my friends. And I wrote this down. This is from Dan Winters, okay, who's like a wacky scientist, but man, he's got some interesting stuff. And I want to quote him and give him the credit on this. You never find it when you want it. I'm sure I wrote it down this morning for this tonight. I'm sorry to break momentum here. Oh, this is frustrating now. The speed of light is not a speed limit, okay? It's not a speed limit. It's a quantum threshold defined by the quantum edge. And so what that means to me is that once we learn how to move our energy up and out, and we break that speed limit barrier of the speed of light, and it crosses the quantum threshold from the third dimensional space, passing through time into fifth dimensional space, time space reality. That energy explodes out. It's like leaving the atmosphere. Okay. So what do you think would happen after the SR-71 got retired? The next plane is definitely going to go out of the atmosphere. It's going to go into space and it's going to re-enter. Or it's going to go even faster. It's going to go so quickly that it's... The other thing is, these pilots in the SR-71, they would have flights that would, they'd refuel several times. I think it was every 2 hours, every 3 hours, they'd need refueling. It was an expensive program. But they would be in the plane for up to, their missions, I think one of the longest ones was in these documentaries was 11 hours. And they're going so quickly, they're going so fast that, one of the pilots said that he saw the sun rise and set 3 times within 11 hours. Now, can you imagine what that does to your consciousness? I remember I was in Iceland last year, and I was there during the summer where the sun doesn't ever really set. It always feels like, even at 4 in the morning, or between 1 and 4 in the morning, where it should be really dark, is this hue. There's this like the sun's still rising, or it hasn't quite set yet, and it's never really dark. And if you're not used to it, it messes with your mind. It throws everything out. And that was when time was going too long, like it was taking too long. Imagine what would happen when it sped up so quickly that you saw the sunrise and set 3 times within a day, not a 24-hour day, a 12-hour day, right? Just the day part of the day. And you had the sunrise and set, like it would mess with your mind, right? So consciously, your maturity, you have to be prepared for those kinds of experiences. And what in your daily life can prepare you for an experience like experiencing 3 days in a 12-hour period? There's nothing really that I can think of that could simulate that. So obviously you can imagine that that pilot would have had to have been debriefed when he came back from that, and would have probably needed a bit of time just to process and readjust back to, the normal everyday life. And so we're moving on now. We're moving on to, these, we're talking about these other programs of these um, anti gravity, all these weird propulsion systems that allow these craft to move in and out through, go so fast that now that, because when you go too fast, the body inside is still, governed by inertia. You speed up too fast, you have too much G force, you slow down too fast, too much G force, you can kill the pilot. So now they're looking at these things where it projects its own environment around itself like a bubble, pressurized or decompressed, but not even pressurized. It's its own atmosphere of time and space that it takes with it wherever it goes, and the time and space just moves around it. All right, so they're going out into space now, and they're taking their atmosphere with. They're producing an atmosphere around the craft, and now they're also moving in and out of time. All right, as far as the conspiracies go, and so if this is all an extension of you, then your body, your human body, your energy, and your consciousness can do this too. Just like, people, now we have mobile phones and internet and conference calling and FaceTime and all that. These are extensions of telepathy. So how are you already telepathic? How do you know when someone's going to call? How do you know when you walk into a room and the vibes of everyone in the room isn't good, or it is good? How you're already doing all this stuff, but we're not really developing it. And it's not that necessarily the skill is hard to achieve, because through training you can, just like these footballers, they can get those muscles going and they can get that super strong fit, and they can practice catching the ball, and they can practice throwing the ball, and they can practice blocking, and all those techniques they can practice over and over again. But then there's another layer, and there's that layer of maturity that comes with all those skills and abilities, and that it's a better word than maturity. You need to be ready, in terms of, you need to have evolved your mind into accepting the experiences of being outside the social consciousness. So here's an example. One of the guys I was watching, who was a football superstar, up and coming, college and all that, training like a demon to get into the NFL. Oh, just watching him train hurt my body. And but like watching and going, oh, imagine being that fit and that strong. Incredible. Imagine how it would feel. Imagine how you would see the world. I know from my point of view, I would feel invincible. I would feel like I was a Superman. And when he was interviewed, because his father was a legend in the game, his whole thing was, he said, because my dad was a legend, and I really, my whole goal, everything I'm training for is to get into the NFL and to match him. And it's interesting because I thought, okay, that could be the problem there, because it's not so much his physical acuity, like his physical ability was like, obviously he could do everything physically, his body could do it. His mind was strong enough to be able to put himself through all that and to tune it all in, to get it so finely tuned that the margin of error was like negligible, minimal, 1%, nothing, even at that high level. But the mindset might be the downfall, because instead of going, he says, obviously great respect for his dad, and so does everyone. He would have grown up his whole life being conditioned that, dad is God, he's he's the greatest, and all that sort of stuff. But now, the game has evolved, the game has changed, and all due respect to him for what he's achieved in his time. But this young guy, in at least the way I saw him, he should be going like, I'm going to surpass my dad. I'm going to stand on his shoulders, and I'm going to learn everything he's taught me, and I'm going to take it even further now. And I'm really going to show up in a way where it's I'm going to add a new dimension to the game, just like SR-71 moving into Aurora Project and beyond, and these anti-gravity aircraft with blah blah blah, you know, taking it to the next level, using all that knowledge, all that awareness, and going further. And so, when we're talking about these great ones in throughout history, these great players, these Hall of Famers, they push the game to new limits all the time, and you have to respect them. You have to give them credit for sure. But there's always that commentator who's talking about the new up and coming young guy who's wowing everybody and approaching that old record that stood for so long. And he says, but in all fairness, today the guy who set the record in the beginning might not even make the pro league in today's game, because it's evolved so much. So although we respect the past, we give credit where credit's due, we have to acknowledge where we are now as well. And we have to, give these new guys who are carrying the torch now, we have to give them the credit where their credit's due too. And so, because they're going to be the ones that are breaking the records in the future, they're going to be the ones that have been doing it under a higher standard, and they're going to be the ones that push the game even further for the next generation to come through and stand on their shoulders. I mean, that's evolution, right? That's how it's always been. But now we're talking about, really tapping into what it is to have a human body, to be this essence of consciousness, this essence of energy, this essence of information, or even beyond that, whatever it is that gave rise to all the consciousness, the essence and the energy. What is that? That's who we are. And so when we're talking about this spiritual practice, we're talking about training, we are coming from an awareness that we already are it. We're not trying to get to it. It is already there. We always have been it. And we are removing all those false limiting beliefs, those things that interrupt it, those things that distract us, all those theaters, all those gurus, all those teachers, all those healers, all those people with names and degrees behind their name that, don't live up to it and don't have a duty of care to people. We're moving beyond all that. And we're tapping back into ourselves. And we're learning about what this can really do when it is unlimited and unrestricted by all these ridiculous ideas of being realistic and conforming to certain systems and styles and theatres and thought patterns and mind control. Okay. And so it takes a level of maturity, it takes a level of time and patience, and it takes a duty of care to be an exemplar. With the SR-71 program, not one plane was ever shot down. The only times the planes crashed were due to malfunctions, and most of that was through the landing gear. Because they couldn't quite, figure out. I mean, it's all changed now, but that was the main problem. That was the main problem with the landing gear. And I'm pretty sure they never lost a pilot. So that is, that's a resounding success for something that was so revolutionary and breakthrough. And, I can only imagine what the success rate of the programs would be now, today, and the loss of life would be at zero, all this sort of stuff. So the pioneers that have paved the way and made the sacrifices, it's that saying, the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the spoils. Up until this point, we're sort of turned into settlers and we're getting the spoils of all these pioneering greats, these pioneering giants that have come before us. But we're really on the verge now of moving into a new level of awareness, an ascension, an awakening, a new consciousness octave, a new scale, where the imagination is king, and it always has been. But now we're getting into this level where what we imagine is what we collapse into reality, and we know that now. It's being proven now. Science is accepting it now. Even the scientific models are changing now. And just imagine what the scientific models will be, in 20, 30 years from now, based on what we know today and what we're practicing. So I want to just encourage you to just let go of, why haven't I manifested $1 million yet? Or, how come my perfect partner isn't in my life yet? Or how come I can't heal myself of that degenerative disease that I've manifested without realizing? Why isn't it happening? It's not a click your fingers thing. That SR-71, the young buck that's going for the NFL, it took years of development, and even when they got there, they didn't stop. They kept going. It became a lifestyle. It became who they are. It's just something you do, and you have good days and you have bad days. Can you imagine the crew of when they were making the SR-71, and they have a malfunction. They go, oh, well, that's it. This idea is never going to work. This is all bullshit. Who are we to think that we could ever get a plane that high going that fast? Oh, we should have been realistic. You know what? Maybe we should go back to the old planes, see what we can do with those. Maybe we convince the other side to stop shooting at us. Maybe we can make all these excuses. It's like, no, they just kept working at it until they figured it out. And then once they had it, they were so far ahead of the herd, it was ridiculous. You imagine being on those programs, being at that high level. The pool gets very small. People, even if they could tell you, there's not a lot of people that would get what you were talking about. But that's what happens when you're going into the unknown, because no one knows what's out there. So if you're the ones that are piercing that veil, then it's like you get to place the flag there. You become the authority there because you've been there. And then once you've been there, this is the other side of it. Once you've had the experience, once you've been there, come back, decompress, debrief, download your data, refine everything. What were the problems? Be honest. Don't just be like, oh yeah, it was just, everything was beautiful. It's all perfect, when you had dash lights flashing and half the engine ripping off and the wing flapping, it was barely staying on. It's like, no, this is what happened. That's what happened. We need to re-engineer this, work it all out, get it ready again, update it, upgrade it, tweak it, get it all perfect. When I say perfect, it's never perfect, but get it all working properly the way it should. Going through all this, for me now speaking, I can see everything working in real time. But every time I go back to watch the replay, to review my performance, for lack of a better term, it's glitchy, it's laggy. The voice is there, but my screen like, it's like comic book here. And so the technology needs to be upgraded for this to work, at least at this level. But where my mind is at for these type of training sessions is even further. The technology doesn't exist out in the physical space yet, but it exists in here. And so we need to go through all of this stuff, months and months of training, just to get your mind ready to be able to go inside safely and start tapping in to the technology that's already present, that's operating outside your awareness on autopilot, that you don't even know how it works and you haven't even got a handle on yet. You don't even know how to access it yet. But when you do, holy shit, your life is going to change. Holy shit, your life is going to change. And that's a guarantee. That's not a negotiable thing. That's taking the red pill, baby. That's Kansas is going bye-bye, as the saying goes. So all the training that we do to have the spiritual experience is so when you do have it, you don't fry yourself, you don't freak yourself out, and you don't crash the plane. You come back and you land safely. You get debriefed and you process, time to adjust, and that becomes your new norm. Okay. And we upgrade the device and the apparatus, the machinery, the technology. We get it all tuned in, and then we go the next step. So beware of those people selling you the quick fix. Okay, there's this huge uproar right now about big pharma and the magic pill, and it's worse than the remedy's worse than the cure. Someone tells you to take a pill for your mental disorder, if there is such a thing, right? And you go, no, that's wrong now. We used to believe in you guys just shoving pills down our throats, but now we don't anymore. Now we know that, the way back to a healthy lifestyle is to have a healthy lifestyle, is to exercise and eat right and look after your body and stop putting shit into it that makes it go the wrong way, and stop thinking bad thoughts and having bad emotions. And it's a habit thing. You've got to get into it, and it takes a while. And the better you get at it, the better your life gets, and it takes a while. It's something you need to master. So why is spirituality any different? Why expecting to manifest your dreams tomorrow? Why expecting that you can escape your life by joining an ashram or sitting in front of a guru? Why do you expect a healer to fix you when your autoimmune system knows absolutely how to fix that? Where the pineal gland inside your head and the pituitary gland and the thymus gland in combinations, activated through thoughts and certain signals in the environment, can produce the chemicals inside your body to activate the exact cure for the dis-ease that you may or may not have. Wouldn't you like to know how to do that yourself? The Tibetan monks in the Himalayas practice a meditation technique called Tumo, which is how to take control of your body temperature. A very useful tool in the Himalayas, wouldn't you think, when all you're wearing is a thin crimson or yellow robe. When the snowstorms come in and that chill weather comes in, wouldn't it be good to be able to go inside, just like you do to your wall and the thermostat, turn that switch on up so the body starts to heat up? Doesn't matter what temperature it is outside. You're warm. Makes sense, doesn't it? Your body can do that. Animals do that. And turn it off when you don't need it anymore. Simple little things. Not so easy to do in practice, though. That's where the training comes in. And so get out of this habit, this mindset of, I'm going to become spiritual, I'm going to manifest all my dreams and goals. Yes, you will. Of course you will. But you might not even want those goals afterwards. Like, if only I could manifest that fur coat so when it's winter, I'll be nice and warm. Learn Tumo. You don't need the fur coat. You don't want the fur coat anymore. You know what I'm saying? What you value will change. What you believe in will change. What you want out of life will change. Talking about making a quantum leap. It's a whole new level. Whole new level. Coming back to the SR-71, think about it. Air Force, fighters, bombers, surface-to-air missiles, guided missiles, everyone trying to kill each other. Who can make a better fight, more agile, quicker movement, better missiles, better guns? SR-71, over the top of everyone. No one can get to it. Even if it could, gone. Too fast. Changes the game completely. Because instead of going to your opponent on the other side of the world, we're going to send the full force of the military after you. So you know what? We've got this plane. You can't even see it. It can get in, can drop a payload, and it can be gone before you can even detect it. I think you shouldn't do what you think you want to do and attack that person over there. It's not a good idea. Let's find another solution where everybody wins, huh? So, we're not just trying to be a good person, although we will be. We're not just trying to access more of our mind, although we are. We're not just trying to feel good with our emotions, although we will. We're not just trying to expand and elevate our energy and awareness, although that will happen too. Don't you want to know what it really means to be you, the essence? Don't you want to know what it really means to be that essence embodied in the crowning achievement of the universe? Don't you want to know what this body can really do? Well, if you answered to yes of those questions, and I expect that you would, then you're going to need to train, my friend. You're going to need to train. All right, and you do it safely and slowly, and you learn everything you can on the way. Because when you get to wherever you go, you will know everything you need to know to be able to stay where you've just gotten to and not slide all the way back into the blue pill matrix again. You've got to get out and stay out, and you can make that new level where you reside. And if you choose to, only if you choose to, you can come back into this plane and you can influence it in a calm and relaxed manner, in an easy and effortless way, which propels the awakening of conscious evolution forward. So, hope you enjoyed that. I would really like more time to explore this topic of the approach to training and spiritual practice with you more. I'm very concerned that a lot of people are thinking they're getting out, thinking they're on the right track, and instead they're just getting re-enrolled back in something else. They're getting repurposed and recycled and reinserted back into another loop that doesn't go anywhere. And I think, well, I know the way out is in, and You need to get to the point where you know enough that you know enough to start developing yourself in the ways that you need to, that are beyond right or wrong. They're beyond, well beyond a right and wrong, a good and bad, a heaven and hell. You know, man, that's just kids stuff. I don't mean to, you know, I don't mean to sound rude to people who are religious. You know, it's a good place to be if it's working for you. But I don't think it's where you stay. I think it's somewhere where it gets you moving in the right direction. But yeah, you know, there's a lot more to it than what we've been shown. And I don't have to tell you that. You know that in here and in here. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate your attention. I really appreciate you paying me attention. I will definitely use the energy that you send to me in a positive way that helps us become more aware of who we are and what we're capable of, and points us in a direction where we can have and experience a lot more freedom and a lot more space to think and feel in ways that are beautiful and blissful, ecstatic and loving, that make us happy, that are nurturing and soothing, and make this world and the future a much, much better place. Thanks very much, and bye for now.